Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. My husband, male 38, and I, female 37, have been married for over 7 years. We met in the first year of college. Our connection was immediately visible as our views on the world were almost identical, in a way that kept us together throughout university and many years to follow. When we decided to tie the knot after nearly 10 years of dating, his father wasn't content with my husband's decision, as it seemed reckless that he marries the first girl he dates, who happened to be me. Nevertheless, my father-in-law found it in his heart to be joyous for his son, and I may even go as far as saying he was the happiest person at the wedding, possibly even more happier than the bride and the groom combined. Over the years, the dad's interactions with our relationship went from being repulsive and exclusive to welcoming and loving. That's why it was to neither my nor my husband's surprise when my father-in-law requested we join him alongside an old family friend aboard their boat on a journey through the seas. It sounds rather adventurous and audacious when in reality it was the four of us with tons of drinks and fish for food for about 2 weeks in the middle of a buttload nowhere on ocean waters. Sure, it included some other activities and festivities that we planned out but clearly never followed up with. There was a lot of preparation to make it happen in the most foolproof way possible since everyone was very familiar with water surfaces and sea camping. Extra canned goods were prepared for emergencies. Kits and tools were cleaned and double-checked. Knots were tied and everything was loaded hours before we were to set sail. Somehow, despite all the precautions and preparations, the trip ended up going in flames in the most horrible way possible. After we had sailed for a couple of hours and were floating within the range of crashing waves and whistling winds, my father-in-law and my husband started pulling out the fishing rods for the elders and diving equipment for my husband and me. I went downstairs to fetch the diving suits and came back up to find chaos had engulfed the tiny boat space. My father-in-law and husband were yelling at each other loudly enough that it could have been heard from the shore. They threw their hands in the air as each one of them criticized the other. At first, I didn't want to get involved nor eavesdrop on their conversation, which was hard since they were the only thing happening within miles range. That is, of course, until I heard my name being mentioned. We sailed back home immediately and the air on the boat was unbearably dense. Nobody could even stand to look at anybody, and I was still mildly confused about how the argument erupted and how my name landed up in it. We packed all of our stuff and left the moment we landed ashore. I didn't even dare ask my husband what happened as he seemed interested and like he was about to burst the moment I asked him what happened. After we went home, I asked my husband what happened and how the argument became. Only once he had calmed down, of course, he told me that his father had been nagging at him for over a month about where he wanted to be in life and what he needed to do to make it better. Father-in-law kept insisting that we put more effort into having kids as soon as possible and repeatedly affirming that he thought that my husband's decision had been spiraling downhill since the day he married me. At first, my husband tried to brush it off on old age and bedroom, but it started getting irritating when it became the focal point of every conversation at every single gathering and chance they got to talk. It was like my husband couldn't recognize his dad anymore. Almost as if the version of him that was in total disapproval with our marriage had returned overnight, and it was evident every time they conversed. That day on the boat, my father-in-law suggested that we try insemination or other methods of impregnation, going into heavy details about our sexual relationship and going as far as making plans on our behalf. Sure, we're both aware that we're not getting any younger, but neither of us craves any offspring. And that's something we bonded over since we started dating. That is also something the dad was aware of before I even met him. So the fact that father-in-law was being so persistent, aggressively reminding my husband how he failed in his eyes, reaching its boiling point and was the cause of that day's vacation. My husband and his father rarely spoke after the events of that day. Things were becoming fairly awkward, and honestly, I didn't feel like getting involved in trying to repair something between a father and his son. That was until 2 nights ago. I'd gotten ready for bed and picked up my phone to set alarms when I noticed that I had unread messages from my father-in-law. They were awfully long texts, and although I knew they weren't directed at me, seeing that they started with "Dear Frederick," the family friend that owns the boat, I couldn't really bring myself to not read it, and I'm thankful that I didn't give in to my morals that day. In that message, the dad confessed to his friend that he was diagnosed with stage 5 brain cancer, which was taking away every piece of his identity at every passing moment. He was certain his days on earth were few, leaving him with barely any time to do anything and enough time to ponder upon regrets and unfulfilled wishes. He expressed many emotions and sentiments of resentment towards life and its events, but one thing he repeatedly emphasized was that he was deathly regretful about having an only son. He feared that his loneliness and cruelty of the world would go hard on his dear son, and he was being consumed from the inside, knowing my husband would be left bloodless once father-in-law was gone. Father-in-law expressed that he wished he had given his son a brother or a sister that could mourn with his life's losses and regrets, and wished he had done things differently. He might have been dying because of cancer, but regret is what ate away at his life as he breathed his last few days away. I stared at my screen for many minutes, reading everything, and felt the stabbing in my heart as guilt took over and empathy resurfaced. My husband walked into the room and saw the tears streaming down my face. He was immediately alarmed and obviously concerned and asked what was happening. All I could do was hug him tightly and cry it out silently without explaining anything for a few minutes, because I knew that once he got to read those messages, I'd be the one that needed to hold him, and I needed to be strong for it. I let him read the messages once my tears subsided and watched as his expressionless face locked the phone and stared at the floor. The moment our eyes locked, I could see that a piece of his soul had sunk into non-existence and could somehow tell exactly what was going on in his mind. It was like everything that father-in-law was doing was so out of character, and that was what made it all the more confusing and infuriating. Still, now the cards are out on the table. Father-in-law's irrational actions are overshadowed by our guilt and devastation. Guilt for not giving enough benefit of the doubt, and devastation for the inevitable loss of a man whose presence in our life gives it meaning and guidance. My father-in-law passed away no more than 2 weeks after that incident. We didn't tell him that we knew, and although it felt somewhat manipulative to turn things around and try to make up for everything from behind the scenes, no amount of time could make us feel like our efforts were sufficient or take away the guilt. I don't think our relationship will ever be the same after this, and quite honestly, I think we kinda deserve it. Not the a-hole. You made a decision based on the circumstances and information you had at the time. Both your husband and your father-in-law made questionable decisions. They both handled things weirdly. I think it's due to miscommunication and possibly the father-in-law's psyche being influenced by the illness. Still, if it helps ease any of your guilt, I personally think there was no blame to be placed in the first place. You shouldn't live the rest of your life ruining your marriage, dwelling over something that could have been avoided. You're the a-hole. Your father-in-law is clearly a lovely, kind man that learned to love your relationship because it made his son happy when he was intact and in good health. Your husband should have handled things differently in a more mature way, even disregarding the cancer element, which you couldn't have known. He should have considered the fact that your father-in-law is aging, which makes him grumpier and pickier, and that it isn't a reaction to snap at him like a teenager, but rather an opportunity to show gratitude and patience for all he's done for both of you. Not the a-hole. Everybody in this situation seems loving and caring, and your relationship with one another is somewhat healthy and reciprocal, which leaves no room for blame. It was just an awful sequence of misfortunate miscommunication and events. I honestly don't think you should let it ruin your marriage. Salvage it and build a healthy family with your husband, as it was a dying man's wish and will. Stop letting guilt break apart your marriage. Own up to what you did and fix it before you become the evil party in this situation. Next story. I have a 4-year-old daughter, Emma. I'm an alcoholic and I've been sober for 2 years. My brother was Emma's court-appointed guardian from when she was 15 months old to just before her 3rd birthday. I had to fight for almost a year to get her back. My brother and sister-in-law are upset that I took Emma from them and have called CPS on me numerous times and make it clear that they don't trust me to take care of my own kid. They love Emma and Emma loves them, so I try to take her to see them a couple of times a month. A couple weeks ago, Emma caught the stomach flu from someone at her preschool. I'm in school full-time and had a midterm that day, so asked my brother to watch her for a couple of hours so I could take my test. They said they were happy to take her, so I brought her to their house that morning with her medicines. A schedule saying what she's supposed to take with medicines and the dosage, a bottle of Pedialyte, and a few changes of clothes. I came to pick her up after the midterm, and half her medicines, her clothes, and her Pedialyte were gone. When I asked about it, they said they threw away all her medicines and the Pedialyte because they were liquids and they were already open, so I could have put something in there to make her sick sleep. Not that it helps much, but I never hurt my daughter or gave her anything that wasn't recommended by her pediatrician. They also said I shouldn't be giving her Tylenol or Motrin. Again, her doctor said it's fine, so they didn't buy her any Motrin. Then I asked about the nausea medication prescription, and they said they didn't think she needed prescription meds for the stomach flu. They also felt her clothes weren't good enough for her, so they gave it to their neighbor for their garage sale and bought her new clothes, meaning they most likely took her shopping when she was sick and should have been resting. I left with Emma and haven't spoken to them since to tell them that they will not be allowed anywhere near my kid unsupervised. I'm working on Thanksgiving, so I was going to drop off Emma with my parents so she could see my family, but I don't want her to be around them without me, so I'm leaving her with her babysitter instead. Now my family is giving me a hard time for not letting my brother and sister-in-law see Emma and are excusing what they did by saying they were just worried about her. Am I the a-hole for not letting my daughter see my brother and sister-in-law? Edit. I'm not going to do the postcards. It'll be a lot cheaper and easier to send an email saying we moved after we get settled in. Not the a-hole. They aren't worried about Emma. They're trying to sabotage your parenting efforts so they can regain custody of your daughter. It was lovely that they gave her a safe space to be when it was needed, but you've earned your daughter and deserve to be her mother without these people treating you this way. Original poster, document this event of them throwing away her prescribed medicine, names, dates, doctor contact info, etc. Keep any texts where they admit that, and their other bizarre behavior that day. You may need it one day. Not the a-hole. Your brother and sister-in-law weren't worried about Emma. They still think that they are Emma's guardians and they feel that she needs protection from you and that they know your child so much better. They need a reality check and they get a timeout. But you need to prepare for continued CPS visits, and they will send minions in the form of family members saying that they were only concerned and worried and only want what's best for Emma. Send the message back that they blew it and you aren't comfortable having Emma around them. Not the a-hole. The medications were prescribed by a doctor. They do not have medical knowledge sufficient to overrule a licensed professional and should not have thrown it away. A fever can be very dangerous to a child if not brought down, and dehydration is an issue in children with the flu who might not be aware enough to know they need a drink. Their actions were not in your daughter's best interests and seemed more about being anti-you than pro-her. They endangered her to prove you wrong, and I don't blame you for keeping her away from them. Next story. We were in the drive-thru for Taco Bell and the line was obnoxiously slow. We had already ordered and it was that kind of drive-thru with a building on one side and a curb on the other, so nowhere to bail when you get fed up of waiting. She continuously honked and I told her that it's not going to change anything. That was the start of her being upset with me. Once we got to the window, she told the kid working there that she was unhappy with the wait. He apologized and said it was because they were short-staffed and were very busy that night. She told him that she wasn't paying for the food. He asked if that meant she didn't want her order. She said, "No, I want my food, but I shouldn't have to pay for it. I wasted so much gas waiting in that line. That's unprofessional and unacceptable." He apologized and said he couldn't give her a free meal. She said, "Well, what about my gas?" He shrugged at her and I got upset and said, "Oh my God, you are so embarrassing. You're embarrassing me right now. Just pay for the food and stop acting so entitled." She told me, "Don't talk to me like that. Is this your car? Is this your gas? No. Then be quiet because you have no say in this." She then continued harassing the kid for a discount, a gift card, and wanted to speak with his supervisor, which the kid declined because the supervisor was busy. Unless we wanted to park and come in, which my girlfriend didn't want to do because she had already wasted too much time waiting in the line. In the end, I paid for the meal. Yes, it wasn't even her that was paying. That was probably flavored with spit after the way she treated him. She's still mad at me for this and wants me to apologize for embarrassing her, but I don't think I'm in the wrong. It wasn't the kid's fault the line took so long, and I thought the way she talked to him was out of line. Oh my God, don't apologize. That's disgusting behavior. But especially in COVID times, everywhere, especially food hospitality, is struggling with staffing. It's gross to take it out on the poor folks that did show up to their shift. Also, when I order food, takeout or delivery, I accept that any issues that may pop up are a consequence of me opting for convenience. She didn't have to get fast food if she didn't want to run the risk of inconvenience. Make food at home. That's my mentality. Don't cave to the manipulation. Trust your gut. You did nothing wrong. Not the a-hole. Your girlfriend, though, she's the reason they're short-staffed. People are sick of getting treated like dog poo serving entitled pine cones like her. So they quit, and then the staff is short and the wait times are long. Vicious cycle. She should be nicer to people making and serving her food or stay home. Next story. Boyfriend and I have been together for a year. We recently moved in together. I'm a full-time law student and he's an engineer. Needless to say, we're both stressed out and in need of vacation. His family is super traditional and old-fashioned. They live in the same small town they were born in, have never left the country, and are extremely frugal, i.e., won't spend money on vacations. I'm an immigrant. My parents are pretty well off and enjoy traveling and exploring the world. I grew up going on all sorts of adventure and wanted to maintain that kind of lifestyle. My parents recently offered to buy my boyfriend and I a cruise vacation for the winter break. This would be the perfect way to see a little bit of the world and relax. Here's where the problem comes. My boyfriend does not have a passport. He refuses to get a passport because he thinks there's no reason to leave the country. In order to go on a cruise, you need a passport, no way around it. I told my boyfriend that I would love to be able to travel with him and that I wanted him to feel like a part of the family and able to go on family vacations. I want him to have the opportunity to see the world. He said he has to think about it before making a decision. I'm getting frustrated because my parents need to book the trip as soon as the holidays are coming up. I told my boyfriend yesterday that if he doesn't make a decision, whatever that decision may be, that I would be going on the cruise with a friend instead. He got mad and said I was pressuring him. Frankly, I think this is ridiculous and that everyone should have a passport in this day and age. Am I the a-hole for threatening to go on vacation with someone else? Not the a-hole. I had a friend like you who married a guy who was like, why do I need a passport? Why would I ever want to leave America? Frankly, that's just a weird concept, but there are people like that. Look, you're not pressuring him into anything. You're going on a cruise. He can come if he wants. Just because he doesn't want to go doesn't mean you shouldn't. Separate vacations are something plenty of couples do. And if he doesn't like that, well, then maybe it's time for a new boyfriend. No a-holes here. You're incompatible. Sorry for ya. I have a friend who loves traveling. I, however, do not have a passport and have no desire to get one anytime soon. I don't travel. I just don't. I hate the idea of it even, and that's okay. It's also totally okay to love traveling and having those adventures. It honestly sounds like you guys just aren't compatible in this category. So you guys are either going to have to get used to separate vacations or find some other compromise.